Did you push the button? You pushed the button.
I did.
You did push
Yes,
the
I
button.
did, Owen.
Okay.
I did. I
I'm
did.
sorry.
I did. Welcome, everybody,
I don't.
to
I don't know. It's
episode
been so long. I don't know what to do with my hands.
509. Yes.
So
Congratulations to you, Owen.
I can't
It's
get this thing off. It hurts and it burns if I try to touch it. Is that normal?
Yes.
Okay.
Embrace it. Go along with it. Tonight we have a special. Wow, we already have what do we? Oh my gosh, we have more people now than we usually ever do.
Ever?
Anyway,
Yes.
obviously, because we're
Not here
about to
for
talk
us.
about the more complete carpet python book. We have so many things because Owen got married in October. Now we have Owen's anniversary. We have the anniversary of NPR. He wanted to make sure that they were coincided with each other in case he forgot.
But
And
not the same
what's
day.
crazy?
Because
What's crazy is that in 2011, when the first Carpet Python book came out, was right around the time that we started NPR. I mean, literally like this same month. I think we started at the end of September. The book came out at Tinley Park. You know, it was a good time for carpet pythons. And here we are 11 years later, and now we have the more complete carpet.
Well,
both
some of us have the more complete carpet. Others are still waiting for their copy.
well,
we won't get into such things. That's neither here nor there. I mean, we're not bitter.
You got to know people in high places. I don't know what to tell you, Owen. Stop messing around with colubrids or something. I don't know. Owen.
Hey, listen, out of which one of us here has lizards? Okay, so
yeah, but they're Australian lizards. So I mean,
shit.
So
all right,
we're not going to talk this whole thing. We're just going to introduce.
Yeah, nobody wants to hear from us.
Yeah, we have nothing. We have nothing, and we're going to talk about the new book. But before we do, right, I want to show people just like the amount of work that these guys did for this book. See, this is the original book, right? That's the first one, and this new one is like,
dear God,
double the size of the book. So I don't think. I mean, like Nick and Justin do. I mean, they don't cut corners on anything. I think this is going to be the carpet Bible for a long time.
There's a reason that there's several years in between books and they didn't just come out with a new copy the following year is because there was more crap.
I guess this took 11 years to write.
Yes, but I love how you've removed the dust cover because you're clearly still memorizing it and you don't want to injure it. So you're like,
yes, I don't want to injure it.
Okay.
Well, I have my copy that I'll keep on the shelf, and then this is the copy that I use.
Used copy that can get thrown around a little bit. I get it.
So enough of us rattling. Let's get here we go. We got Justin, and then we got Nick. Welcome, guys. Welcome back. 11 years later.
Yeah.
Here we are.
So much has changed and then stayed the same.
And stayed the same, yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the coolest changes in the last decade or so is that I've become personal friends with you guys. We've gone herping, we've hung out. It's really a cool thing. You guys are just, I mean, week in and week out, this podcast, it's amazing. You guys,
I can't escape it. I can't get away.
The juggernaut, the juggernaut. Good job.
Lawyers have told me I have no choice. So yeah.
This is true. I made them sign contracts. I'm not dumb. I guess, when did you guys decide that you wanted to write a second book? The day after it came out?
It couldn't be an easy thing to think about.
There's a moment where I talked to Bob and he said, "Oh, we're getting kind of low. It might be time to think about doing another edition." And all these 4 years later.
Yeah. Anytime you a paper would come out with new information or new data, and you're like, that needs to go in the book. We need that in there. Or, you have a thought about the group as a whole, or maybe some hypotheses or ideas of how they group together and stuff, and you're like, that needs to go in the book. And so all these different pieces and coming out and like, oh, we didn't talk about herping, that probably should go in the book. And where do you stick Owen Pellies? They're kind of the new data shows they kind of fall in line with the carpet clade. So, let's put them in the book. Yeah. So we just kind of kept adding and lots of discussion, and of course, lots of writing and back and forth. And I think the most difficult process, and the process that we kind of tip our hats to all the contributors is all the pictures and all the personal observations and things like that were contributed by Eric and and Rob and a bunch of Australian friends, and it's kind of a team effort in that way where we could do a good book, but to have all the pictures of wild carpets in their habitat, locality known, I really think it is the icing on the cake for sure, and really makes the book just kind of go the distance. So I think there's going to be something there for just about anybody. We have all Nick went to Herculean efforts to organize all the morphs. There've been quite a few more morphs since the first edition. So that was, I'm like, here you go, Nick. You take all that.
We know how much you love the morph project.
Yeah.
I think
you're the morph man. I don't have any morphs anymore, except
I think the morph chapter unto itself is 160 some odd pages. Just that.
Yeah, like that could be its own book at that point.
And it was kind of like, we had pictures and descriptions of all the morphs and things in the first edition, but we wanted to go more into it, like how do you prove out a morph, or what makes a morph, and things like that. What are the different kinds of morphs? And so we went into far more detail in this edition, kind of talking about that. So yeah, it was a fun process.
Very cool.
I think go ahead, Nick.
I think in the morph section, the original book, the first edition, has that whole chapter has 3 pages of text total, distributed throughout the whole thing, and the new one I think is 15 or 16 pages of text.
Jesus.
And there's no text for the actual morphs. It's just, here's a picture of this combination. It's like it's all more substantive stuff at the beginning.
Yeah, we have a little bit on the base morphs, but then it's like, well, the combos are just combos of these base morphs. So
there's so many.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I go ahead, Nick.
I'll say for a hot minute, there was a picture of every single morph combo that existed on the Earth in that book. Since then, the minute you stop adding pictures, like someone will hatch something, no doubt. But I'm sure there's a couple obscure combos that have hatched since then, but it's extremely comprehensive.
They didn't make it to print, so it's fine. Forget about it.
You get people like, last week I had somebody, is it too late to send pictures? Yeah.
Yes.
It's on the way from China.
On a boat right now. Like, it's done.
And we I hadn't seen all the morph stuff until we got the blue line, the PDF from Russ. Gurley laid it out, and I mean he went to a lot of effort, and we're kind of fussy. We kind of wanted that control over what went where and what picture was on the front, and if pictures were missing, we're like, hey, we need those in here, that kind of thing. So Russ dealt with a lot of back and forth from us, and again, just he's one of the key contributors in that regard to the layout and making the book look nice and read well and things like that. So a lot of props to Russ Gurley, and he's just a fantastic guy anyway. He's been around for a long time in the herp game. He knows his stuff and has just probably bred more things. He's probably forgotten the things he's bred more than I've bred species. So
another nice thing about Bob and Russ as well is that they really did give us free reign to do whatever we wanted to do. Like, there was no suggestions, no nothing. It was like, so we got to just write whatever we wanted. No one changed a word of it. It was like, sometimes you have people editing and stuff and they're wanting to make changes for this reason or that, and they really didn't do that at all.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
Complete control of the. Yeah. So if you don't like it, it's our fault.
Yeah.
But,
for sure.
It is 100% what we wanted to put out.
Down to the cover. That was like I put the cover together and I said, this is how it's gonna look. This is the picture that's going on the cover. And the backside of the cover.
We discussed it, and Justin did a mock-up. Just make this image in your own program. It's like, here's the pieces, and there's a reconstruct this exact thing, and it is. That's exactly it.
But that picture that Matt Somerville took that's on the cover, oh my goodness. That's like one of my favorite pictures ever. Like, that is the epitome of just a beautiful carpet python, and really got me into that kind of type or locality or whatever you want to call it. Potentially subspecies. I don't know.
I think that picture was like floating around or something, and I didn't know that you guys were putting it on the cover, and I think I shared it or something, and Nick messaged me like, "What the hell are you doing?"
Who gave you this? I don't know.
I don't care. Like however many times you see it, you look at that and you want to look at it and stare at it again. Like it's that good, you know that.
I really wanted that picture on the cover because to a lot of people, when they see that, their first question is, "What is that? What kind of carpet is that?" It doesn't fit neatly in any sort of preconceived notion of what these different regional forms look like. It's unique.
Yeah. So with that being said, I mean, so have you answered the question? Have you guys answered the question of what is this carpet?
Like you tell us what this thing is now.
That is a long and complicated answer. But,
excellent. Go on.
The homework has been done.
There were some pretty good papers published in the interim between the first and second edition, and some. I mean, the most I guess detailed of those studies was a paper by Ciavaglia and colleagues that sampled quite a few carpet pythons, and this was continued work from is it Duncan Taylor. So we quoted him in the first edition, and then they continued his work and did more genetic analysis and things like that. And so they've shown differences. Now, we're not, taxonomists, so we're, this is kind of our best guess, but, we read a lot and try to understand these things as best we can. So hopefully we've come up with a reasonable scheme, and it goes along with, some proposed splits and things. Oh my gosh, can you hear my dog yapping? Sorry about that.
No worries.
But
keep talking. Go.
I'm not sure what his deal is. But so using those published papers and our common sense, I guess, we kind of see phenotypic and genetic differences between the different groups, and so we laid out what we thought fit best, with the data. And I'm sure some people disagree, but guess what? That's what taxonomy is good for, is to start beef and to start, hey, that's you guys are idiots. What are you doing?
The quickest way to start a fight in the reptile community, taxonomy.
Exactly.
I will say that I do think that our reasoning is sound, and I don't know anybody that's ever put this much time into trying to figure this out, because we did lines of inquiry that no academics really looked into. Justin, in particular, in the evolutionary history chapter is about 20 additional pages this time, so it's way more hardcore than it even was the first time. There is another section in there that Justin had a hypothesis, because animals in dry regions in particular, river systems are like basically dispersal mechanisms, because that's the easiest place to make a living. And that's definitely true of inland carpets. And so overlaying these river drainages with where you find populations and genetic disjunctions and everything, and you see a really tight correlation between that and the genetic data. And with those Flinders, Gammon, those westernmost really arid adapted inland carpets, what you find is that there's actually two river drainage basins in the dry part of Australia. You've got the Murray-Darling Basin, which everybody knows. All those rivers occasionally have water in them, even sporadically for a minute, and they all drain into the ocean south of Adelaide. But there's an entire other river drainage system that's just north of that one, that's the Lake Eyre drainage basin, and it doesn't even drain into the ocean; it drains into Lake Eyre, and those rivers are really dry. And Lake Eyre only has water in it maybe once in a decade. And those strange inland carpets are largely pretty much confined to that other drainage basin. And that seems to be the distinction. And if you look at a map, even though these still have water flowing in them very often, those drainage basins don't overlap. They don't intersect. So they're just any river snakes that got up in this one or that one are isolated because the habitat between is presumably too arid. And that seems to be, but no one else had ever stumbled onto that.
And that's, I guess that's kind of the exciting part, because for the most part, we're kind of standing on the shoulders of giants. We're, looking at other people's research and things. So, when I kind of thought, hey, I wonder, if the drainage basins of Australia have anything to do with, and then you line up, like Nick said, lining them up and almost seeing something that's almost too good to be true. You're like, okay, yeah, maybe there's something to that, and so that's kind of another piece of the puzzle that we use. So not just the phenotype and the genotype, but also the biogeography of where they're found and how they got there and things like that. So yeah, that's I was very excited to kind of to have the contribution that was maybe something novel. I even brought it by or told Rick Shine about it and got his input, and he said, it sounds reasonable, I'm like, all right. If Rick Shine gives it,
I've loved this theory since you slipped it to us in Texas and we weren't allowed to talk about it. Like, it was just like, so I had to wait for like moments when Eric and I'm like, there's no recording devices around anyway. Yes. Like, I love how that works.
It's fun. And we've got lots of figures in the book that kind of illustrate that. So hopefully that's helpful. And the other kind of interesting thing that was those flinders, gammons, those carpets kind of in that interior area were on, genetically lined up closer with jungle carpets than they did with inland carpets. There was kind of the jungles fell in between there, the northern coastal jungle clade there, and we're like, how is that? How does that make sense? But some of these kind of more inland, between inland and Centralian. What do you call that? Double inland? I don't know.
Super inland.
Super inland. Yeah. There you go. There's their common name. Thanks.
That's what you
Owen.
need. Yeah.
So these super inland, they range up pretty far north, and those northerly ones were pretty closely related with the ones down in the Flinders and Gammons, and so that's pretty close. There's actually a river that kind of goes up into where you find the northern coastals, the jungles, and the northern coastal carpets. So kind of another potential piece or
the rivers don't intersect at the present time, but if you kind of rewind a little bit to 45 to 60,000 years ago, the climate of Australia was considerably wetter, and prior to humans kind of showing up and altering the whole ecology of the continent. And you could easily see a scenario where you'd have intergression of those northern coastals into that interior Lake Eyre basin. There's a couple of these rivers, they get really close together, and all it would take is a strong monsoon, in a slightly wetter time period where you can see the probable point of contact for those genes to have migrated into that population. In the past.
And it sounds like this year, was somebody saying this is well, at least in Victoria there's floods everywhere, and everybody's pretty flooded. So Trent Edwards, so that's that happens, and things get moved around, and nothing's, clean cut. This is all a dynamic process. And that's the fun of trying to slap a label on something that's moving, pin the tail on the donkey that's alive and running away from you while you're trying to pin the tail on it.
That sounds like a challenge, but
And of course, this is happening over millions of years. So, this is kind of a freeze frame in time. And so who knows what will be in the next, million or 10 million or whatever time scale we're on here with this stuff. But and how far genetically do you need to be, and do we believe in subspecies? That kind of seems to fade in and out of popularity as well. So what do you call them? I don't know. And I frankly I don't care. I just like to identify those things that make them different in some way, so I don't know what the implications are. I mean, you might say, well, I want to keep it pure in captivity, or I want to, am I going to mix it with the normal inland types? I'm going to keep things locality pure. Whatever you want to do with that information is up to you, right? Because, morphs kind of come in and everybody kind of throws everything out the window anyway. It says, let's breed our Centralian to our Southwestern to our, Roughy and get some.
When can I breed it to a Jaguar?
Hybrid.
Okay.
Exactly.
Like, that's all I want to know is what do the Jags look like?
It's What's funny is that I remember when I was getting heavy into the morphs, and Nick said to me, he's like, one day you'll turn around. And I was like, never, you'll never do it to me. And yes, here I am, like more into just normal carpet pythons than I am into morphs. But
and I found that interesting. Like that was kind of a nothing against my buddies in Australia, but sometimes like I'd go on trips and I'd find stuff and they're like, oh, I've never seen that. I'm like, but you keep and breed it and it's in your own country. Why don't you go check it out in the wild? Come on. Like, I had to fly across the world to go find this thing. You just have to take a 4-hour plane ride and you're there, like, come on.
I think we have banged this drum. You guys both have banged this drum for years about like our perception here, especially in the US, of like what a wild carpet python looks like. We've been so this yellow and gold that's just neon and beautiful stuff, but like nothing like what you're gonna find. Well, maybe something not neon, but you'll find yellow, whatever.
Oh yeah. There's some nice ones out there.
I think you guys did an amazing job at capturing that within the natural history chapters. Like you sort of alluded to it earlier about how, just the variety. I mean, there's one picture that Scott Eiper had in there. I think it was a coastal, and it's just wild looking. Yeah. Like, I mean, I don't know. I was really impressed with that must have been very difficult to track down all these pictures.
Who needs morphs when you have the variability of the carpet complex? I mean, it's crazy. And morphs are fun and stuff, and they're easy. You breed something with the gene and you get more with that gene. But I think some of these selectively bred projects, or just focusing in on certain looks of wild carpets. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that one.
Who needs a hypo when you got that? I mean, that is
Eric. Let me let me hold the book for a little bit, and I quickly had to memorize all the pictures and words that I could.
But one of the main goals and differences from the first edition is that we wanted to have all wild individuals in the natural history section. So it's just wild animals, no captives. With maybe a rare exception if we, we're desperate for pictures or something. Yeah. Isn't that crazy looking?
I like that idea.
What's the locality on that one, Eric?
Paluma. Queensland?
Yeah. Pretty crazy.
It almost looks scrub python-esque, but
yeah, so much variability. And I was kind of geeked out by some of the island stuff, the stuff you find on some of those little islands off the shore of Queensland or whatever. And they have populations of carpets and they're like really red or, crazy looking. So yeah, there's some neat. And the Torres Islands, the straits between New Guinea and Australia, kind of those little tiny islands. We got some. Nick located some pictures from up there. These didn't you located? Wasn't that Melissa Bruton that supplied those?
It's like somebody was talking to her about some pictures from another study site on the peninsula, and then they had a friend. I asked about, has anybody ever done any work up in the Torres Strait? And sure enough, I was able to get a few pictures from some of the Torres Strait islands.
Yeah,
nice.
So I was expecting the next herp trip is like, all right, guys, get on the boat. What?
Yeah,
like, we're gonna go check these island species,
right?
Like,
So are these the islands that are sort of like right above Darwin, like in that area?
No. Above
these are over
the tip of Cape York.
Okay. Yeah.
In the Torres Strait. Just I don't know. There's just such a diversity, and that was the other thing. Like after we wrote the first edition, I went over to Australia for the first time and saw a couple carpets in the wild, and kind of got looking, and people started posting more herp trips, and those kind of the Flickr or whatever photo hosting sites got more and more wild carpet pictures. I'm just thinking, man, there is a huge diversity. In captivity, we have in our mind, this is what a jungle looks like. This is what a coastal looks like. This is what a centralian or an inland look like, and there's no deviation from that. But naturally, there's quite a bit of deviation, in some regard, especially with the Cheney eye, McDowell eye stuff. But pretty
maybe
cool.
You can guys talk a little bit. Let's start with this. Like for each of you guys, what was the biggest surprise? The thing you were like, what?
The biggest hit punch that you expect people to probably freak out about in the book?
expect people to freak out about?
Either one.
They're gonna.
No,
He probably already.
I want
Eric
to go
already
right
knows.
for the.
He got one of the couple advanced copies we got sent, but the changing of the designation and definition of what constitutes Cheney, from being a small regional jungle carpet to a much broader, wide-ranging taxon, and people are they're so locked into the mindset that Cheney are jungle carpets and that everything else is a coastal carpet. The idea that there's two different types of coastal carpets and jungle carpets are just a subset of northern coastal carpet with no genetic distinction at all. And you have to, anytime you meddle with taxonomy at all, even a little bit, the number one rule is the rule of priority. You can't just name things. If somebody else at any point in history ever put a name on a population, you have to use the oldest name on the books. And when we reluctantly had to accept that there are two different coastal carpets, formally, you had to use the oldest name on the books. And Cheney, the type locality for Cheney is within that population, so you kind of had to default to Cheney. So Cheney now is the biggest range of carpet pythons. This is a huge range.
Well, aside from variegata.
Well, yeah.
That was the other thing that we did that may step on some toes or whatever. But that's kind of, and Nick and I went back and forth a bit on that, and that's kind of what we came to. I think it could go another way, and that would be fine too. But that's kind of what we landed on, and just said these are pretty closely related. They all, there's some pretty close phenotype between the different populations in New Guinea, Darwin, and the Cape York Peninsula, and so that's and the data kind of backs that up. Those things are pretty closely related, and so we just said, they're all let's just throw them all under variegata. So
that's another. The variegata complex is another example where the biogeographical kind of historical data overlays perfectly with the molecular data, where you see like all that land to the north of Australia and south of New Guinea was all dry land, and we know from sediment cores from mineral exploration that the habitat on that submerged area of land was all eucalypt savanna, so carpet habitat.
Right. Then
right in the middle of that, you have a giant lake. So it would have been, that submerged area would have been full of carpet python. So it's no surprise that relationship. But because, and in the terminal Pleistocene, at the end of any glacial period, as sea levels rise, as glaciers recede and sea levels rise, and that area starts to submerge, it submerges, the marine inundation happens from west to east. And once it gets to the Carpentaria Basin and floods the Carpentaria Basin, it effectively severs the gene flow between what we would consider a Darwin carpet and the populations in New Guinea. That happens much earlier, and then the separation between southern New Guinea and Cape York, they maintain a rather robust land connection for 6,000 years longer. 5,000 to 6,000 years ago, you could walk from New Guinea to Australia without getting your feet wet. It was still a dry land corridor,
right?
Presumably gene flow. So the genetic data shows exactly that. The southern New Guinea and Cape York are essentially genetically identical. Darwin carpets are close. They're different genetically, but not that much. It perfectly lines up with the fact that they diverged earlier by that marine inundation event, while the other two maintained connectivity until very recent times.
So Cape Yorks and New Guineas are genetically the same.
Yeah, basically there's almost no difference between a gelatin jungle and a New Guinea carpet. They're effectively genetically the same thing.
And this is not, surprising. We see that in a lot of different species. The water pythons, there's a lot of different frilled dragons, and there's a lot of different things that share the green tree pythons that share that southern New Guinea and northern Cape York. So that it's not a big shocker. Let's just put it that way. And then, that, like Nick said, that sever between Darwin and the other two populations was earlier. So they have diverged a little further, but, is it enough to say there's something different and where they look very similar? And I get, that's kind of where we said it could go either way, but this is the way we're going with it. So
they're the closest to any other carpet thing. You gotcha.
Yeah.
Pythons, the green pythons are a very close analog with the Aru population, Maruki, and the Cape York animals, with Cape York and Maruki being almost genetically indistinguishable and phenotypically very similar. Aru is pretty similar, but not exactly the same, and genetically close, but you can tell they diverged earlier because Aru is at the very edge of the Sahel Shelf. When sea levels start to rise and in the beginning of an interglacial, Aru has the shortest period of connectivity with Sahul, in that they're the first place to go under to become an island, to become isolated, and they're the last place. So the period of time is very brief, but they're actually part of that contiguous landmass since they're right at the western edge of it. So you see the exact same pattern. The water pythons show exactly the same pattern.
Yeah.
Fog dam animals are genetically different, and Cape York and New Guinea are genetically indistinguishable. The frilled lizards, same exact pattern. Anytime you have that three-way distribution of top end Cape York and New Guinea in the same clade, you always see the same pattern.
And also in addition to that, I mean, so that saddle between the Kimberley and the Darwin Peninsula there, you get a break there as well. There's another biogeographical barrier that occurs there, and you also see the same distinctions or whatever. There's kind of that genetic break, whatever it constitutes, between the frills in the Kimberley and the frills in Darwin area, and then the frills in the Cape York Peninsula. Now the people who did that work didn't give them separate subspecies or species names, so they're not identifying huge breaks in that regard, but there are some biogeographical barriers, and there are some genetic differences between those three populations. So I guess that's always been the challenge of this, is how far do they have to diverge to constitute different designations, and there's no rhyme or reason or rule for that. So it's just based on what the different researcher feels. So, I mean, obviously, with the Antaresia work, they said, oh, let's just sink them all into children eye, Stimson eye into
that'll work. That'll fix it.
Come on, man. Come on. Yeah. I don't agree with that one. And I don't think, a lot of people do, but, and I see a lot of people adopting it and calling, their Western Stimson's pythons children eye, but I'm not doing that,
The crazy thing is the same paper clearly shows that Western Stimsons are different.
Yeah.
Their own data is they're clearly different in this data, but nope.
Yeah. And then they make the case that there is some intergression between these populations, but I don't think that negates a species barrier. You can have some interbreeding between species, and that's called a hybrid or
integrate zone. Yeah,
it's like that happens all the time in lots of different species. So I don't know why this,
like our own species, the irony that a scientist is poo-pooing things because of intergression when the scientist himself is an amalgam of at least three different archaic hominids that we interbred with in our own selves. Is we are a mosaic of, a little pinch of Denisovan DNA, a little pinch of Neanderthal, a little pinch of super archaic West African hominids, the ghost lineage they detected. We're like that too.
Yeah.
So,
Nick, I think you got more than a pinch of Neanderthal. I think you might have a scoop.
I mean,
I'm going to have my DNA run again because I really want to know, and I'm hoping it's a big number. I kind of want
you want to start carrying a club, don't you?
Wear that proudly.
Yeah. I think that's so cool.
It's my heritage. Ow, you're hurting my hair.
That's great.
Yeah.
So, where are we at with diamond pythons and coastal carp? Well,
I mean, I'm looking at it and I'm confused by this thing. So,
okay, where's your confusion lie here?
Well, I want a gammon range carpet, so that's one thing there.
Okay.
But there's aside from the changes that you just kind of talked about, Eric, have you whited out the scientific names on this picture?
No, I think this was pre. I don't know why we're getting
the censored version. Got it.
No, Justin was putting this together.
Oh,
Yeah, this is an earlier version of the posters that I sent to Eric to get his feedback. So see what he thought, that kind of thing.
Gotcha. So there's no hiding for things, and there's no special reveals that are going to come from the poster. Got it.
You have one behind you. You can see the finished version.
That takes effort to unroll it. I don't. What do you want from me?
Oh, you have one.
I know it's over there. We just said it.
An interesting thing with the coastal carpet, the true McDowell southern coastals, is that genetically they're more distinct than we had previously believed, and so much so that you could make a reasonable argument that they should just be Morelia McDowell and not even be a subspecies.
Wow.
To put that in like really easy to understand terms, no one questions that a diamond python is a species. No one questions that a Brettles python is a species. The amount of genetic distinction between a Brettles python and a diamond python is the same as a Brettles python and a McDowell and a McDowell. All three of those are equidistant at a genetic level. But two of them are species, but one's supposed to be a subspecies. If we apply this standard fairly, it would be Morelia McDowell.
Yeah. And I guess I want to kind of speak to the lines, where you draw the borders and boundaries and stuff. And that's kind of the challenge with all this, is because we have records and they sampled in some of these populations. So some of this is a little bit like, arbitrary, like, okay, this is where kind of the border is somewhere around here. As best we can guess, but it's always hard to draw a firm line and say this is where this ends and this starts. That's a tricky thing. So that's an artifact of something like a poster like this. It simplifies it a little bit, but
Nick, I think you're echoing.
Echoing?
Yeah. Well, we're echoing. Yeah.
I don't know. It all sounds fine to me.
Sure, because you're not echoing.
You might need to plug in some headphones, is what we're saying.
If you
I
can
can't plug in headphones. My computer broke. My headphone jack on my computer broke, and it took me a lot of time to figure out that was what the problem was. The jack itself just died.
Or if you can mute.
Just mute when you're.
Yeah, mute and then talk.
How would I even do that?
There's
I'm technologically challenged.
Hang on.
What?
Okay, Boomer. There's a button down at the bottom.
There you go. See it?
There you go. You got it.
Echo.
And you just hit the unmute button when you want to talk.
Yeah, that's all. We'll get around technology.
Wave your hands and we'll unmute you. Like that works too.
Put your hand up if you want to say something.
So what I got we were talking about. I think Nick was talking about coastals and diamond pythons.
Yeah. So that genetic difference between a diamond, so diamonds and Bretteli, they kind of line up kind of genetically closer to each other. And then the distinction between a diamond python and a centralian python is as great as between coastal, the McDowell proper, kind of those Brisbane area coastals, and a diamond or a centralian. So basically saying, why is a diamond python a species and a centralian python is a species, but a McDowell is a subspecies? Why is that the case? So, and you could probably arrange these different ways. We could have said, hey, it's Morelia spilota, Morelia McDowell, Morelia Cheney, and that's incidentally how they were originally described by Wells and Wellington back in the early 80s, so it's like, but they were New Zealanders, so they said, we're not going to listen to that. You're a bunch of Kiwis who we don't let you dictate what our Australian snakes are. I don't know. They weren't very popular in the day.
Yeah, fun fact, no carpet subspecies has ever been described as such. They've all been demoted. Every one of these was described initially as a full species, and then someone subsequently decided to either just demote them to subspecies status. Sometimes the first guy had it right.
Yeah.
It's so weird that you can like just kind of go back around. Like you do all this stuff and you end up right back where you freaking started after all the other stuff.
Yeah, so that was kind of a surprise to see diamonds and centralians kind of, near each other in the cladogram in this Sea of Aglia paper. I think I talked to Scott on the Fight Club, and he was like, "Oh, so you're saying diamonds and centralians should be the same thing?" I'm like, no, that's not what I'm saying. Something like that. We went the rounds with that one, but there that was kind of a surprising thing, and it is what it is, and whatever genes they looked at, that's what made that line up that way. And I'm not saying if you looked at different areas of the genome, you might see a different arrangement. And that's always the challenge. What do you use? How much of the genome do you use? And how do you make that distinction? But I think biogeographically, their natural history is so different. The diamond pythons are very unique in a lot of ways compared to some of the others. And that a case could be made that it could be just Morelia spolota and Morelia migdali. So
Jesus,
we kind of went with convention, but
if you were to elevate migdali to full species, then Cheney would have to then it'd be Morelia migdali. Cheney would be a subspecies of migdali because they are more closely related to Cheney's more closely related to migdali than migdali is to spolota. So you'd have to rename all the other stuff, or at least juggle the names around based on their relationships.
And we didn't do that. We didn't juggle them around like that, right?
We juggled them a bit, but
okay.
redefined the boundaries there, but kept the existing names because we were able to do that.
Okay.
One thing, we didn't want to play amateur taxonomist and everything, even though we pushed the envelope with that, but didn't want to stop short of naming a new subspecies or doing that sort of thing, even though an argument could have been made. We didn't want to get too far out of our lane, I guess. But
okay.
This is the closest. There have been a couple things about carpet python taxonomy. One is there has never been at any point a universally agreed to taxonomic arrangement. There's been a million different arrangements and no one ever agrees about it ever. That's always, disagreement has been the norm the entire time.
Right.
There's been genetic data, there's morphological data, there's all this. There's never been an arrangement that brought together all of that until this book. Our arrangement fits the biogeography that we see, the phenotypes we see, and the genotypes. All of that is factored into this, and it's really the first arrangement anybody that I'm aware of has done where they factored all of that in. I mean, the people that look, they'll look at some genes and they'll just construct a tree based entirely on that and ignore biogeography and morphology entirely. And they originally were described based entirely on morphology and ignored biogeography because it wasn't understood at the time, and no DNA either. So we've adopted what you would call the total evidence approach, which is look at all three of these lines of evidence in their totality and then draw your conclusions from that. And I think anytime you look at more evidence, you draw a better conclusion than just looking at a single line of evidence.
Okay, and it's just you said this is the northern coastals that would be they would almost break out into their own thing, or is this kind of like the southern coastals?
The southern animals.
Southern coastals, okay. The northern coastals are kind of more closely related to jungles and the Chennai.
Well, northern coastals are jungles.
Jungles, got it.
Jungles are northern coastals.
Got it.
Yeah, I mean, in the analysis that we ran, we had Warren run a bunch of samples for this book. That's why there's that little phylogenetics chapter embedded in the book. You find that there's like no daylight between a Tully jungle and a Rockhampton coastal, but there's a big difference between a Rockhampton coastal and a Brisbane coastal.
Got it.
The paint job on an animal, that phenotype, there's no tight relationship between genotype and phenotype. You can have massive phenotypic differences that do not reflect any significant genomic differences, and vice versa in some cases. So what you find is that it is literally only skin deep. And my own personal experience, and some of you guys as well, with selective breeding of carpet pythons, I took yellow jungles and made them bright white jungles, and it only took me 20 years. But if I could do that noodling around with a couple pairs of snakes in 8 generations in 20 years, imagine what nature could do. If you were to genetically test my ivory jungles, you would find no daylight between them and any other northern coastal at all, yet they're dramatically different in phenotype. It's just not reflected. It's not, just a handful of genes which are insignificant in the grand scheme of things genomically, can make a massive impact on phenotype.
Right.
And Schmitty asked a good question about, how can McDowell be so unique or different when it's kind of nestled in between everything else and kind of overlaps in some ways with some of the others. And I mean, that's a great question, but that's kind of where this drainage basin thing came in. Those splits that we saw between and the biogeography, the splits that we see genetically also correspond with the different drainage basins and some biogeographic barriers. So in the first edition, we talked a lot about that Black Mountain Corridor biogeographic barrier. That's up kind of near above Cairns a little bit, and that's the separation between those Cape York carpets. Yeah, thanks, Eric, with the cursor
pointer. Yeah,
between the Variegata and the Cheney. So we talked a lot about in the first edition, and then kind of in preparing the second edition, I looked up and found a paper that had all these other biogeographical barriers, and wouldn't you know, they also were between these genetic breakpoints that were identified by Ciavaglia. So there is one kind of, and whenever you show kind of this block range map, you kind of simplify things. And so in the book, we've included like dot maps showing, where an individual has been found and located. And so, there, even though the range may go down and touch the other range, there's not a lot of individuals kind of in those biogeographical barrier zones. Like you kind of have a paucity of samples, and in some of those areas they're very well populated, so it would be very difficult to believe that nobody's seeing carpets when they're there if all the people are on the East Coast. So that's kind of another evidence where there's these breaks, and there's also actually some in the northern coastal group, there's other breaks besides these. And so this is also a simplification, kind of lumping them all together under Cheney. There was, not really another name, but there probably could be potentially other breaks, and they could be unique things. So I can't remember where exactly those breaks were, but we kind of show those in the book, the different biogeographical barriers. There's also one down between the southwestern carpet pythons in the west and the inland carpets, and also the gammons. So that little where they all kind of come together, there's another biogeographical barrier there. And that one was also shown to be important for shingleback skinks. They differ on either side of that biogeographical barrier to some extent. And so that's another one that could be important with carpet pythons, because that's, the southwestern carpets kind of make their way over east and stop there. And then the inlands come over from the east towards the west and stop there. So, and then the ones above that are kind of the ones that are on the cover. I think Dragonlair was asking about that in the chat. So are we supposed to guess what the cover picture is? But yeah, that's that light blue color, kind of the little skinny balloon shape. Yeah, the one that Eric's pointing to with the cursor is those gammons, flinders, the ones that's on the cover of the book. They kind of range. And again, the line, the border on the east side, that border between inlands and the gammons, flinders types, that's also difficult to say where that is. That could be further south. It could include more of the dark blue and the light blue, or vice versa. It was hard to draw that line. And I think there were a few individuals that I included in the darker blue color that probably should have gone in the light blue color because of phenotype. But it's the ones in the light blue color tend to be more reddish, like the one on the cover. Not usually that dramatic. That one's really red and really nice looking, but they tend to have more of that red and orange and yellow in their pattern, versus the inlands that are kind of that steel gray and black, more typical what we think of as an inland. So currently, gammons and flinders, that group is kind of thought of as just a variant of inland, and that could also be true. I mean, we're not saying any of this is, dogmatic or anything. We're flexible, and we admit that this could go a different way, and that new data may come forth that says all this is bunk, and we're okay with that. That's how science works, right? We don't get attached to a certain theory or another until we have, kind of more data in place. So things could come to light down the road that could change this, but for now, this is kind of the best we could come up with the available information. Hopefully
there's
that
no
answers
doubt
the questions.
that population is distinct, phenotypically, genetically. It's just a matter of, I mean, a lot of people probably don't understand that taxonomy is almost completely made up. There's no rules. It is literally entirely up to, there's no objective standard as to what constitutes a species. There isn't even a specific definition of what a species is. It's just whatever the person writing the paper decides, that's what they go with. And since there is no guidance and there's no objective criteria, it's just widely open to interpretation. This is our interpretation. Other people can look at it and say, well, yes, they're different, but not different enough. So we don't, it's just entirely, so it's not that they're not distinct. It's a matter of, in whoever's opinion, how distinct is distinct enough to warrant specific recognition. I've just noticed that I can click on the tab for comments and I can see all the comments that have come in. I only just figured that out, and apparently we're confusing a lot of people.
Lucas
there were
is
a couple
fired.
Questions. I wanted to address a couple questions from the Herpetoculture Network. Put out a couple questions that are along the same lines, and the first was that not understanding how coastals could be so different when they're nestled between all these other things. Ostensibly, I interpret that to mean when you have not one but two populations of inland carpets in between that are kind of nestled in between, but not as closely related to the diamond, coastal, and Brettles pythons on either sides of those inland carpets. And I think the thing that people need to remember or think about it this way, it's you're looking at the range map and you're looking at where populations of carpet pythons are now. That's not historically always been that way. Well, right now, a coastal carpet would run into some inland carpets long before it got to a centralian carpet. That doesn't mean that those inlands were always there in the middle. So this seemingly nonsensical, how can they be separated when they're so nestled in, is that those other populations might be more recent additions to that area. They haven't necessarily always been there. Populations move around. If you were to look at even over 1,000-year cycles, you'd see the populations and range maps would look like an amoeba, just undulating, moving, advancing, contracting with climatic conditions and everything. So there's a tendency to look at these maps and think, well, this is where it is now, this is where it's always been, and that is anything but true. I mean, 12,000 years ago, it would have been the map would have looked completely different. 20,000 years ago, it would have really looked different. This is just what it is now. And so while animals become separated, when they are separated, they wander off on their own separate evolutionary trajectories. And then conditions change and they become in closer proximity to each other, even right up against each other, after having developed separate genetic identities. This is how you end up with a diamond and a coastal that are quite different from each other in all respects, but they actually overlap slightly. They would have never speciated into two different things if they were always connected. They just, at some point, they were separate, developed separate identities genomically and morphologically, and then now conditions are such that they have come back together and have an intergrade zone. So it's just a very dynamic situation. The other follow-on question that they had asked was, why didn't diamond pythons make it to New Zealand? That one's a little easier. The New Zealand has been isolated for millions of years. New Zealand has been separated from the Australian mainland for longer since before carpet pythons even evolved as a thing.
Yeah, so no snakes made it to New Zealand, right?
No snakes made it to New Zealand. No. So even if they could eke out an existence there, they missed, the ship left long before they even came into existence.
Mm-hmm. And there was also a question about the Null Arbor Plain, and I imagine at some point in the maybe more recent history that was supported, that could support carpet pythons in that area, and with the aridification of Australia, that's just shrunk and been a little more hostile towards the animals surviving there.
Would that be the same?
Mutiny.
Would that be the same with up here between the Cape York and say, the northern part? Like,
I don't think there was. I mean, it's possible, but I think they'd have to find a fossil specimen or something. But I don't think there have been any reliable records from that region of carpet pythons observed. I mean, potentially, if they could find some kind of, and Nick would definitely know more about, the fossil record regarding carpet pythons or pythons in general, but I don't think there's ever been carpets known from that area, at least, in recorded history, aside from a couple of reports, but I don't think they're credible. They just don't range down that way. The furthest they've been observed is kind of up on that, where we have the brown, the lines, but so we base these on observations of where carpets have been seen, and that's not to say somebody might not find a carpet outside of these areas that we've designated. So it's possible, but a lot of people go to that Lawn Hill and those areas kind of around the bottom of the Gulf of Carpentaria and do a lot of naturalist surveys and things, and nobody's ever found a carpet python except for one herper that claimed to found a pair there. So that looked surprisingly.
There's no reliable reports at all, and it's a little odd in that the habitat should support them. It's like they should be there, but for some reason they're not, and neither's anything else. That's the same. It's called the Carpentaria Gap, but it affects, again, the water pythons, the frilled lizards. All these things that seemingly could exist in that habitat are missing, and it's probably something to do with that recent marine inundation of that area, which was, 20,000 years ago, that was a very different area. You had a brackish lake that was landlocked with rivers that are now dry, and it was a very different scenario. And there's something about that event that seems to have severed the distribution east and west on the other side of the Gulf of Carpentaria. But exactly the nature of why that's the case, why aren't there little remnant populations along that southern coast? No one really has a good explanation for that.
Yeah. There was another question that popped up, Nick, that I think this is right up your alley. So where's the take on brittle stonewash and diamond stardust? Are they similar? Do you have any thoughts on that?
They are similar. However, the diamond python community has not really quantified what that is and how that works. It takes a few generations of careful breeding to figure out how something is inherited and rule out all other possibilities. And to date, no one's been willing to do that, it would seem. Regarding those stonewash and Brettles pythons, it is very simple. It is a piebald gene. Stonewash is a piebald Brettles python. It has all the hallmarks of any other piebald gene. It's just a weakly expressed piebald gene where the white areas are only contained to the ventral surface. But just like in all piebald genes, the hets are usually a little bit odd looking a lot of times. You get kind of a irregular disruptive area, a pattern where the white areas interface with the pigmented areas, just like in a pied ball or a pied burr or anything else. And it kind of creates like a granity sort of border edge to the ventrals on a stonewash. It's just a weakly expressed piebald mutation. Is a stardust diamond the same thing? It seems very similar to me, but to date, no one's done the multi-generation breeding to try to isolate and prove that out. I would be a little surprised if the stardust diamond thing turned out to be a polygenic trait like some people have claimed. It seems like it's a morph. It seems it's so pronounced and so obvious that it doesn't. You know it when you see it. And another thing is that piebald genes in general, they all show high variation in expression, so it fits with that model. I don't have any, so I couldn't tell you if the ventral surface is piebald on them or not. But there's reason to, reasonably you could infer there might be some similarity there with the stonewash.
Look wise, there's a lot of similarity between the two.
You have some, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah, flip him over, take a picture. Jeez.
I actually do have an adult male, but he's such a complete lunatic that I have never handled him, like ever. Like,
yes.
this is the meanest snake I have ever owned in my life. He's absolutely just a psychopath. Like, I'm not picking that thing. I don't care. I'm not gonna. I'll let you diamond python guys figure out how that works. I don't need to prove everything out. Like, I'm not touching that snake. Yeah, flip it over if you get piebald ventrals. And if the ventral surfaces doesn't show a lot of piebald or it's difficult to tell, one trick I found works really well is a black light. Because even a subtle difference between like cream and white that's very difficult to tell with the naked eye, the whiter scales, the pied scales, will fluoresce under a black light, and the difference between them and the surrounding scales will be greatly increased. And you can put them under black light, and if you see a blotchy belly, that would be a huge indicator that it is along those lines.
In addition to what Nick said, you know, there's these kind of, I mean, where pythons share a lot of the same genes, you know, they also have a lot of the same disruptions to those genes or mutations to those genes. And so you'll see an albino in, you know, a ball python and a carpet and a Burmese, you know, you'll see the stardust, you know, diamond and Brettles and, you know, a zebra. And what was a blood python? There's like a zebra blood python as well, something similar to that, you know.
Spider and ball python. Yeah.
Jaguar, things like that. So, you know, that's to be expected, I guess. Yeah.
You see the concept of analogous mutations arising in different, distantly related groups. You see it over and over and over and over and over again. It's why when you breed an albino corn to an albino king, your hybrids are also albino, because it's the same exact mutation. You know, the batik blood python that Justin mentioned, it is exactly the same as a zebra. You get a super busy patterned heterozygote that's fine, and a homozygote with a high propensity for tail tip kinking, and it's patternless. It's the same exact thing. The black-eyed leucistic form you find in ball pythons, the fire and super fire ball pythons, that type of leucism occurs in blood pythons, retics, Amazon tree boas, and boa constrictors. And in all cases, the heterozygote is kind of a low rent hypo looking thing, and the homozygote is a black-eyed white snake with random yellow blotches and or occasional black blotches in all cases. So it's the same, you know, people, I think there's a tendency to think that, you know, different species are just vastly different at a genetic level, when actually to be an animal and alive on Earth, you have to, like 95% of you is the same. Like everybody knows they sequenced the human genome, but they also sequenced the rice genome a few years later, and it turns out we're also like 78% identical to rice. So the difference between these pythons, it's small. I mean, there's difference in regulation and gene expression and stuff, but you need a lot of the same genes are present, most of them, in all of these things. So you would expect that similar or identical mutations would arise in multiple lineages independently.
Pedrick had a question. I guess this is the one. Wait a minute. Are Papuans jungles?
So that's one thing we kind of addressed in the book is jungle is still kind of an adaptation to kind of more closed canopy forest living. So you will have a jungle phenotype. I mean, when I was in southern Queensland, we found a carpet python kind of on a well-wooded mountain that looked, you know, very similar to a jungle. It was bright yellow and black and banded, and you know, and so it's just an adaptation, kind of that closed forest living is best we can determine. So you will find a carpet or a jungle carpet phase of the, you know, the Cape York carpets and the Cheney, you know, the northern coastals, or whatever you want to call them. And then, you know, maybe other areas could also have kind of that similar look, like, you know, down in Brisbane area, you might have a jungly looking coastal that's adapted. And I always had thought that if you took a clutch of carpet pythons and, you know, you put them in the closed forest canopy and gave them a couple 10,000 years or something, he'd probably come back and see them looking black and yellow as well. So it's just that adaptation to a different, and this can be somewhat confusing too, is because phenotype can be pushed by the environment, right? It's not always necessarily strictly genetic, but I mean, it's genetic, but the selection, if you hide better from predators, that phenotype is going to persist. And so if you look the role, and then if you have two different areas that are maybe far away from each other, but the similar phenotype survives better in that environment, then they're going to look similar, even though they may not be related at all. So similar phenotype is not always an indication of relatedness. Is that clear as mud?
I'd add that, like, all of us have bred sort of generic standard issue coastals at some point, probably many times, all of us. And I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that you three, as I have many times, have occasionally hatched a generic coastal that had a real jungly look, like the background color was all black and it was like really contrasty and kind of looked like a jungle. You're like, huh.
Yeah.
All we're saying is that, and this is, basic evolution 101, is that you have a survival bias. If there's 20 eggs that hatch, but one of them has that look, it's likely to survive, and it's not going to take long at all for that to become established. If that works better, and that animal is the one that survives to adulthood and reproduces, it's going to make more. It's not going to be it doesn't have to be a very long, arduous process. It can be very quick and to adapt to local conditions. And that extreme sort of phenotypic plasticity you see in the whole carpet python complex, this is why they're all over Australia, which is a pretty tough place to make a living. It's why they've persisted for so long in all these different environments. It's because they're so variable that random variation that pops out gives them a huge advantage. It's like if the conditions on the ground and the habitat change, they're likely to kick out a baby that's going to do well in this, in this type of, habitat. So it's not necessarily a slow process, but it's also why it's not coupled to any significant genomic differences. One other thing, I think it was it Patrick said, are Papuans jungles now or something to that effect? And yeah, no, they're not. It's the only thing that's confusing to people. What you've always called a jungle carpet is still chainy. It's not changed. But a lot of what you'd call a coastal carpet is also chainy. And the most confusing part of that is now in the United States and Europe, we have gelatin jungles. And they're not chainy. They're a rainforest adapted. They're a separate thing that is independently and converged on a rainforest adapted color phase that has nothing to do with the ones further to the south. Do you call a gelatin a jungle? I kind of gave that up and just called them gelatin carpets because it just it makes an unnecessary layer of confusion. But they are just, if variegata developed because all the other variegata up on the Cape of New Guinea, they're not really in rainforest habitat. They're in traditional carpet python savanna habitat. And the one place down in gelatin where in that area, in Cape Tribulation and those areas where they are in closed canopy old growth rainforest, that's where you find it's their version of that color phase. So that's the only one that's confusing. But if we just quit calling gelatins jungles, then it's probably less confusing.
Yeah.
Note to self: stop calling them jungles.
Yeah, there we go.
I mean, you could. I mean, they are kind of that jungle phenotype. I mean, that bold,
but then it's a lot of explaining. It's easier just to say no.
Yeah, that was the other fun thing about the gelatins is they're not all black and white. We have like a page of several different gelatins next to each other showing the variability that you can see in gelatin jungles, and the majority of them aren't black and white, right? Probably 80% of them or 90% of them are more gold and black, kind of like a typical jungle that you would find in jungle habitat. So, I mean, if you want to still call a gelatin a jungle, that's fine too, but just know that they're potentially variegata and not chainii. So
I think you guys would probably agree that this doesn't mean that you go, I mean, like, okay, so you're not going to go and breed your locality, like Tullys or Palmerstons or Gelatins to IJs or Popwins, and sort of, you know, think like, oh, it's the same thing. And now we can have a
somebody will. One thing I struggled with, and I told Jess this, where it's like, oh my God, I'm literally going to be the person that made albino granites pure. Like,
yeah.
And I also made jungle jags pure, apparently. Like, you're mostly, it's like, that's,
oh my God, he did. Oh
yeah,
God.
Theoretically, you could literally make a snow granite that would be pure variegata, even by any reckoning. It's
snow granite jag.
Easy,
it's still good.
And again, I mean, you know, it's all snakes in boxes for the most part. We're not changing anything in Australia by, you know, breeding a Darwin to a Cape York carpet or whatever you want to call them. So, but you know, they are somewhat genetically diverged, right? So the Darwins are more diverged from the other two populations, but we just felt that divergence wasn't enough to warrant, you know, trying to figure out names for all those populations or whatever. I guess it was, you know, kind of, I guess, what do you want to say? Like giving a hand to the tradition that we have, you know, of these are this and this is that kind of thing. So, I mean, we're calling them Cape York carpets. We're not calling them Darwins, right? And we're calling them New Guinea carpets, not Darwins. So they have three separate names, three separate populations, although they're all under variegata. So, and at one time, all carpet, like a lot bigger range, was variegata as well. So, you know, that's changed over time as well. So back in the day, everything was variegata, I think, for a little while or something.
Outcrossing my Brisbanes has now become way more complicated than I ever expected that it could be now, right? Is what we're saying.
And Brisbanes are the only locality we have from the south, right?
Yeah,
but don't do it.
True McDowell.
Yeah, they're the only true McDowell that you can have confidence in.
Mm-hmm.
The other problem and this is one that maybe gets a bit controversial, but it kills me to say these things even, but our gene pool of coastal carpets, after 30 or 40 years of people assuming that northern and southern coastals were the same thing, is so irreparably mixed up that it can never be fixed.
Yeah.
You can be confident that the vast majority of our generic coastal gene pool are northern coastals, but you can also be confident there is at least that pinch of southern coastal blood in there. You look at the classic, and I hate that I know the name of somebody else's snake, the Madam Blueberry animals, and you can tell me there's no southern coastal blood in that, because there is. And I had some from a guy named Dale Sylvester in the 80s, and it's like, yeah, that's some big, flat, patternless head. You know, there were a small number of, you know, so you have a generic coastal gene pool that you can't say it's not pure, but you definitely can't say that it is. It will remain unknown forever. So, and as somebody that's a fanatical purist, I gotta make my peace with that I've probably been making mixed animals this whole time and continuing to do that. Like, well, what are you gonna do? I mean, to draw a hard line for me on that would mean I would have to get rid of half of my collection. Every morph coastal anything, like all the tigers, all the xanthics, all the, you know, jags, all of that, all the caramels, all the hypos, everything would have to go, because all of it falls into this basket of probably Cheney with a pinch of McDowell. And so you just kind of, I'd like to propose, if anybody's listening and pays any attention to anything I say, that we almost have to kind of consider like a third type of coastal. You've got real McDowell, you've got northern coastal Drew Cheney, and then you've got this large basket in the hobby of generic, you know, sort of pet trade coastals that we're never going to get, because we're never going to get a solid answer. It's too far gone to ever be certain. So does that mean we should abandon our xanthic tiger projects? I'm not. I mean, but there is, you know, you're never going to get clarity on that. It's just too late to ever know. So I'm just gonna keep plowing ahead with those things. At the same time, I'd never even consider breeding a Brisbane to anything, and neither should you, Owen. It's the only for sure McDowell we have. Don't mess those up.
Please don't be that guy. Yeah.
You know they're different when you've got.
I know. I see. I look at them. Yeah.
Lucas is waiting in the wings. He's very proud of you, Nick, for saying that without having an aneurysm.
Lucas had another question that actually I was interested in. It was real quick, is do we have any island localities or species of carpets in the pet trade, like from these tiny islands, like any of these small island localities?
No.
Cool. Damn it.
If there was, I would already have them.
Yes.
I would be the first person to line up for that.
Hold on, I've been starring some questions. We'll get this one out of the way real quick. Ryan Cox was asking, do gelatins fall near the Black Mountain corridor?
Justin, you're muted. You're speaking, but no one can hear you. You're just going.
I love it when people do that. They do lie north of the Black Mountain corridor quite, a bit, and so and genetically they align more with the other carpets on the Cape York Peninsula further north, and so we've grouped those in with the variegata or the Cape York carpet pythons, so not Cheney. Yeah.
If you look at a gelatin carpet and you recognize that, like, the phenotypically, all the stuff on the Cape York looks pretty similar to what you find in New Guinea, that same basic phenotype. And then you have these gelatins that are a departure from that. But if you really look at the distribution of pattern elements, color, all that sort of stuff, and if you just imagine you could turn the dial and just turn the yellow pigment down towards an axanthic, that's basically all it is. They've got the same pattern as the rest of the stuff on the Cape and in New Guinea. They've got the big blushing flames that come up the side, only it's like all that's really happened to make them that is a reduction in yellow pigments. So there's like a nature's made quasi-axanthic. If you turn the yellow pigment up, they would look like pretty much like everything else on the Cape. So they're not as big of a departure as you think, because it's really only that one pigment that is, in short supply with them. Everything else is basically the same.
Okay. There was another question. This is from Captain Job. Is there anything genetically that makes some snakes more likely to be defensive than others? Is it just a survival thing based on where they're originally from?
I saw that earlier and I was thinking a little bit about that. I wonder if it's mammalian predators. There's a lot more mammalian predators in kind of the rainforest habitat on the East Coast, but I don't know. I'm sure an Australian could probably answer that better, but
we do know actually. Yeah. It's actually discussed in the book somewhere, though I can't remember what chapter it's buried in now, but there is a fairly consistent relationship between adrenal gland output and fight or flight response, meaning the more of it you have, the more likely you are to be flighty and or aggressive. And we've discovered that, through the process of domesticating animals, that all you're doing when you domesticate something is you're breeding it for lower adrenal gland output and thus greater docility. And so if you can selectively breed for something to be more docile and have a lower adrenal gland output, then nature could basically put selection pressure for a greater fight or flight response and greater aggression, depending on, the selection criteria for any particular habitat. So it does. So temperament is hereditary, at least in that way. So it's possible that being really bitey and aggressive in a rainforest habitat is more conducive to surviving. And if you're a centralian python, you have fewer predators and maybe it's not as big of a deal. Animals that have a very high fight or flight response and higher adrenal gland output tend to be harder to breed in captivity. It's why scrub pythons and white lips are very difficult to breed in captivity, because they're psychos and they're stressed out and they're flighty and they're nervous and they don't, whereas carpets pretty easy because they're mellow and they're not, for the most part. So there is a correlation there. So the answer, I guess, is yes, kind of, sort of.
Short answer, yes.
Tony asked a question about, the Papuans. And I think, just to kind of sum all this up, I think locality kind of fixes that. Like if you're just trying to breed, locality animals, like we said earlier, this could all change. You know, somebody could come along and do more research and show that what we're saying here is, you know, bunk, and that, you know, it's this way instead. And if I look at the green tree pythons, right? People have been breeding those all over the place, and there's no, you know, very few localities anymore, and they're all designers now. You know, there's some people with some of the localities, and that's fine. But, you know, breeding them all over, now all of a sudden you've got a bunch of hybrids. You know, all these designers are just hybrids, and so you don't have a lot of the pure stuff. So I think as long as you're not breeding your Papuans to Darwins or Cape Yorks or whatever, you're just fine. I mean, and you know, there's you know, we provided a fairly updated and more accurate map of the distribution of those Papuan pythons, you know, where they kind of have been found, and kind of talk about that a little bit. And there's a disjunct population. You have some over in the, you know, the western side and some on the eastern side, and they're separated by water, and so, you know, they could be different too. But I guess we don't really have populations of the eastern animals over in the New Guinea side. But the I don't know, all the name changes and stuff has got my head in a jumble. Plus I just drove like 20 hours, so I'm a little out of it anyway. But
a little bit.
I knew I shouldn't
It's
have set
all
up my I knew I
20
shouldn't have set
hours.
up my breeding scheme for this year coming until after the show, because I'm like, just like, nope, can't do that one. Nope, forget that one. That I can do this one now. It's like, yeah. So
yeah, I heard you mention that Brisbane Cross. I'm like,
I was thinking about it. Now I can never do it. Like, now
don't
it's
do
sacrilege.
it. Don't do it.
Of course, now I hatched one of the baby Brisbanes that I hatched this year was a female and has like really nice stripes. Now she's staying. She's mine now. Like, you're the only thing I can do with this project. So, yep.
So I want to talk about something that's near and dear to me and Owen, and obviously you guys too, but the Owen Pelly python made its way into this book. How did that come about?
The most recent molecular analysis has shown they've been bounced around a lot and presumed to be, because they're kind of an oddball. They're so morphologically different from everything else, being so elongated. They're kind of hard to, you know, to place. They've been believed to be closely related to Laius, and then to the scrub python complex, and then, you know, it's been all over. The most recent and the balance of the molecular evidence suggests that they are on the same lineage as the carpet pythons, but they're an early offshoot. So basically, imagine, if you will, like, you have the lineage of pythons that will ultimately become carpet pythons and green tree pythons and rough scale pythons and all that stuff. You have that branch of the Australian python radiation. They broke off very, very early. They were the first to split off from that lineage. And within a few million years of them splitting off from that lineage, Carinata splits off from that lineage. And then quite a while goes by between those two lineages splitting off, and before you have the split between the green python clade and the carpet python clade. So what you have is the Owen Pelly pythons and rough scale pythons are considered sister species to Owen Pelly pythons are sister species to rough scale pythons, the green pythons, and the carpet pythons. Carinata is a sister species to the carpets and to so it's like the same with the Carinata. They're not a carpet or a green python. They diverged before that split. So they're not ancestral, but they're a sister lineage to both of those clades.
So the better question is, why weren't green tree pythons included in this edition? And maybe that's the third edition. We could cover the whole clade.
It would have been like the Lord of the Rings. It would have been 1,000 pages.
Yeah,
been like crazy.
It's a coffee table book. So does that mean that now Owen Pelly is under Morelia in nomenclature? Is that something? No, it is.
No. I mean, since it diverged earlier,
yeah.
You know, it has been described under, well, it was in this paper, it was given the name Nawaran, which I thought was kind of cool because that's the Aboriginal name. But as Nick was talking about earlier, precedence prevails, and it was originally described as Nyctophelopython, which is kind of a mouthful and sounds strange, but that's what we're stuck with, and that's what they'll be. So Nyctophila python, get used to that. And
damn it.
So we were just calling them N. Owen Pellensis. But yeah, I mean, they're I guess this kind of goes back to the old discussion: is a centralian carpet a carpet python? Yeah, I mean, is Owen Pellensis within the carpet python clade? Yeah, I mean that larger grouping, the carpet python clade, that's where it fits in. So yeah, we figured, where else are you going to put it? Once they took it out of Somalia, it wasn't, with the scrubs anymore, and it didn't really have a good fit anywhere else. So we thought, let's put it in the book.
Let's take it. Got it.
Yeah.
The real question is, if they have their own genus for being morphologically distinct and an early offshoot of that lineage, but rough-scale pythons are also only diverged slightly later than Owen Pelly did, and they are also a very morphologically distinct lineage. Why are they in Morelia?
Yeah.
And why are chondros in Morelia? Because they're morphologically clearly should not be. Morelia should probably be just the carpet pythons. Why? Because basically 100 years ago, they decided that anything with a prehensile tail is in Morelia. Basically, it's like all the scrub pythons, and you find out like there's a lot of daylight between the green python complex and the carpet python complex. When you look at any of the carpets, they obviously all belong to a cohesive unit. When you look at any of the green pythons, they also obviously are all much more closely related to each other than they are to anything else. That's the definition of a genus. All the members are more closely related to each other than any of them are to anything else. So why is chondropython not a valid genus? So I'm kind of opinionated on that one, I think.
So basically, Owen Pelly should be its own thing. Ruffy should be its own thing, and then green tree python should be its own thing, away from carpet.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is, if Owen Pelly's deserve to be their own thing, then why don't Carinata deserve the same, as they meet all those same criteria, but not? I mean, because they're the only keel-scaled python. That's a pretty oddball thing. They have huge eyes, massive scalation differences. They're weird. They're different. They are. Why are they not worthy of being their own genus if Owen Pelly pythons are worthy of that?
Yeah.
Excellent.
So 3. Yeah.
3. I don't know. Can you write? I mean, I don't know. This is pretty comprehensive.
Keep making them bigger. Just keep going. Yeah.
I thought it'd be cool to have like a book that covered all the Australian pythons, but
Jesus Christ,
yeah,
huge.
Well, I mean, it's been done, but
several volumes is what you have.
Have the detail of the carpet python book with all the pythons.
Wow,
that would be cool. But
you could have it like a set, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just go.
Pythons of Australia, volume 1, volume 2. Yeah, just each volume covers a different thing. I'm all for it. Let's do it.
We've already got volume 1 and 2. The Antaresia.
At the same level of resolution and detail, you would have a book that would be on the order of like 6,000 pages. Because if it took over 600 pages just to knock out the carpet python complex, even when all the dust settles taxonomically, there's more scrub pythons than anything, and retics. There's a bunch of retics that are awaiting description. There's
Australian. Limit to Australia.
No, not the 30 Indo pythons.
There's a lot of species of python, so it would be an arduous. Any such a endeavor would have to probably be a little more concise in nature, or no publisher's gonna print a 3,000-page book.
No.
Or a 5-volume set of books. It's just too much.
Yeah, probably right.
Justin and I would die of old age before completing it. If it took us 4 years to get this one done,
yeah.
So,
although
there was a pandemic in there, so we have a little bit of an excuse.
That probably helped anything and nothing else to do. But
that's true.
I think that
didn't help me. I was busy with viruses.
A little insight into things that. Part of the reason this book took so long is because we had a plan, what we set out, what we were going to do, how far we were going to go, and then we kept moving the goalposts. As we got more and more into it, it's like, well, that doesn't make sense, and that's not right, the taxonomic stuff. So then we really didn't want to be moving stuff around and get into that, and then we wrote it, and then we rewrote a bunch of it, and like as a half measure, they were like, oh, screw it, we have to go all the way. and then we had to redo it again. So we had to keep redoing it until finally we just, you know what? It's going to confuse people that Cheney is this big thing now, but that's just, it is what it is. It's what the data shows. Clearly, it's what the data shows. So
redoing it was such a pain because you had to go into like the coastal chapter and pull out everything that referred to the northern coastals and put it in the northern coastal chapter, and you know, all the stuff in the Darwin. Yeah, it was a headache. All the stuff in the jungle carpet python chapter that applied to the stuff in the Cape York Peninsula, you know, the Cape York carpets. Yeah, it
sounds like fun.
It was
so much fun.
It was a nightmare. And then all the maps that we'd made, you had to go back and change that. So luckily I'd saved all the maps as like the, you know, the Photoshop version, so I could easily manipulate them and change them to some extent. I mean, it's still a headache and a nightmare. So yeah, like I said, there were a couple of those samples of the gammons, flinders, whatever you want to call them, that were a little further south that were included in the inland, and I'm like, those probably should be the others, but I'm done messing with it. You know, I'm not gonna mess with it just to change a couple spots. So I don't know.
Yeah, those maps changed a lot. There's a lot of various versions of this. It's like, as much as I was saying, like just going through and like trying to break things apart and get the references all right, and the same thing with the Variegata stuff. I mean, Darwin's always had their own chapters, so that was fairly straightforward. But the combining Cape York and New Guinea but still drawing distinctions between them, these are things we agonized over and really contributed to how long it took to get this done.
Yeah.
Plus, there's also, I mean, we're both pretty stoked. Wow, we get to do a second edition. That was, you know, it was pretty cool. We were pretty excited to do that. But I think both of us very early on decided we didn't want to. A lot of second editions of books are just, you know, you slap a new cover on, throw in a few new pictures, a bonus chapter on something that wasn't there before, and then send the same book out, basically.
Yeah.
And we didn't want to do that. We wanted to make it an entirely new book, and so we doubled the length, added over 300 pages, additional pages to it, and rewrote almost everything. I don't think you can find a single paragraph in that book that is even if it was something that was there before, you won't find a paragraph that hasn't been changed. Everything's been changed. And every picture is changed. I think there's fewer than 10 pictures from the first edition that are in the second edition. It's that few. Virtually every image, even in the morph stuff, it was like, nope, we already did that. And so it's got to be a new image so that it feels new. Another thing is we also decided kind of early on with the way we were going to structure things to have only wild snakes in the species chapters dealing with wild snakes and only captive snakes in the chapters dealing with captivity, was to try to democratize it a little bit and give more people the chance to have their picture in a book. So the amount of photographic contributors is just exponentially greater. Like, you know, instead of getting 50 pictures from one person, it's like I'd rather have one picture from 50 people, which is, you know, logistically more difficult, but it kind of wanted to make it more of a community effort where everybody felt a part of the process, or more people had the chance to have a picture of their animal in a book if possible, or their data incorporated into a table or a chart or whatnot. So that was, it made it logistically more difficult, but I think, I don't know, I'm happier with the end product, and I hope people who get the chance to thumb through it are as well.
I'm hoping that people are happy to have their picture in the book, and that will suffice, because we had a lot of people asking, you know, for a free copy if they contribute a photo or two, and we're like, yeah, we'd be broke. We'd be spending all
one picture. No,
we'd be spending our own money to supply you a book. You know, that doesn't, you know, this is not a lucrative business. We're not making a lot of money. You know, I just dropped 10 grand at Bob's place to pick up the copies I got, you know.
Well, I just got the invoice for mine.
Yeah.
It's a
big purchase, you know. And so we have to buy the books that we sell personally. So, and we get very little royalties from the other books that are sold. I think, you know, $1 or $2, you know, but split between us kind of thing. And so it's not, we're not making a bunch of money on this. It's kind of a labor of love situation here. And you know, I hope it's great that they get to include their picture in the book.
Well, I can tell you as somebody that has a picture in the book, I mean, I didn't make the first cut because, we were just kind of coming into the carpet python world, but, I can die a happy man. I mean, I have a picture in a carpet python book. What the hell?
Yeah.
It's
The
amazing.
entire morph thing. Like
You got a few pictures in there.
Yeah. But I'm just saying, even if it was just one, the idea that, I don't know, just blows me away.
We wanted to legitimize it with the Podfathers, photos in the book.
Yeah, right. Oh,
each copy has been blessed by the Podfathers. Just like, yeah.
There you
go. But yeah, it's I I don't know what else to say other than if you're into carpet pythons, this is it's gonna blow you away. I mean,
I'm curious what you like, what's hit you the most, or what you've gotten the most excited about with the new edition over the old edition. Sorry to spring that on you.
I think one is I said it, just the how you guys were able to capture the whole idea of the variability of wild carpet pythons really impressed me. I don't know. I don't know. I'm sort of taking it in and like rereading. I don't know, because it's to Nick's point earlier. It is really like a new book. Yeah, I don't know.
It's kind of hard maps too, because you had a lot of spoilers. I think you were privy to a lot of things that most people weren't. So I think
and then just,
you edited some of the book.
I said stuff in advance too to look at.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So we appreciate your help on that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
When you talk about the variability, I think that the McDowell chapter has 28 pictures in it, and it's 28 different snakes, all wild snakes, in 28 different places doing 28 different things. So you can see the breadth and width of everything, that's out there and everything. And that was the easiest one to get pictures of, because there's always a lot of people taking pictures of southern coastal.
But they're all from a very kind of like concentrated area. You don't see a lot from the extremities of the range. So that like, even though we had a ton of pictures, they all kind of were grouped around Brisbane, that kind of thing. So and maybe they're harder to find a field, further afield. But yeah, that was kind of a trick.
There's one picture I'll forever lament not being able to get for the book. Well, there's two actually, but sometimes you stumble onto an image and you can't find the actual person who clicked the camera to get their permission. And you can't use it if a third party gives you the picture. You got to find the actual photographer and get their permission. Mm-hmm. One was a wild patternless coastal eating in somebody's driveway. It was just on the ground. It was like completely patternless. It was obviously some sort of morph. A big southern coastal, totally patternless.
Yes.
But it was like the guy I got the picture from got it from his buddy who was the neighbor of the person who took it or something. You could never quite find that one. And the other one was a picture of a wild diamond inland intergrade in the wild, which we speculate. Wow. I actually referenced this as a thing that exists. And the picture was awesome. And it was exactly where you thought, if such a thing existed, it was exactly where it would be. And it could only be that. It was obviously not a diamond and obviously not an inland, and looked exactly like what you think a diamond inland mix would look like. And it was right on the interior, on the Murray-Darling Basin side of the mountains, but not all the way out on the flat land, but kind of in the end of the mountains as they start to peter out. There was a river that kind of went up, and there was a reservoir that went up into a valley in the mountains itself. And it was there on the banks of that, right where that point of contact would likely been, and it was clearly what it was, but I was never able to actually get a hold of the actual person who took the picture. It was it was even a good image too.
That same regard, we do have pictures of what look to be those the chain eye Metcalfi intergrades, and that was kind of a fun thing for me, was to see kind of that intergrade zone between the northern coastals and the inlands, where the mountain ranges kind of peter out a little bit, and there's some room where the
rivers flow inland a bit, and you have tree lines that could get them in and in close contact. And then seeing okay, here's an inland record and here's a coastal record, and pretty close, and they're all kind of converging on this one area, this kind of wide area, and seeing that the overlap zone is fairly good size. So yeah, kind of an interesting thing to stumble upon through more of a photographic thing, because I kept seeing pictures, people labeling them as inlands, and they're in the interior, but they clearly look like coastal carpets. They don't look like an inland carpet. And then as you get closer to kind of the overlap zone, you see some that look like they are they're intergrades. And so that was pretty cool.
That's awesome.
We actually have two pictures of those from the same exact location. One's an adult and one is a juvenile, and I think one's in the inland chapter and one's in the coastal, in the Cheney chapter. But the adult looks like a weird inland, but with more brownish orange flames than it should have for an inland from the Murray-Darling Basin. And the other one is a juvenile that looks much more like a juvenile coastal carpet, but again, a little off. It doesn't look. It looks like it leans a little more to the coastal side, at least as a juvenile, but they're in the same place. Yeah, exactly the same, which is right where you would hypothesize such a thing would be.
Yeah,
right.
That was pretty cool to I guess stumble upon, in doing the research for the book.
Yeah. How do you guys write a book, take all this time, and keep from burning out on a subject? Do you like not want anything to do with carpet pythons for a while and move on to your next book? Or, I mean,
already on it.
Yeah, I do
on it for a while.
I admit that once we kind of get it sent off to the printer, it's like, I do like to see it in my hands and kind of flip through it, but I'm not like reading it, or because I know I'm going to find like a mistake or something that we didn't catch and be like, oh, great, and so I kind of have to put it away for a little bit and then go revisit it, a little while later, maybe in a year, I'll be able to flip through it and read through it a little more carefully and go, oh yeah, that's in there.
You tend to fixate on the things you wish you should have done or forgot to do or got messed up that nobody else noticed. Like the first edition, I was obsessed with that we didn't get a good picture of an Isle of St. Francis carpet.
Yeah,
that one bugged me. And there's a picture that got a production error where the low-res image actually made it to print and didn't get swapped out for the high-res image. So it's an imbricata on eggs, but it looks like it was taken with a black and white surveillance camera or something.
That explains
a clerical error, basically. But it's like,
yeah.
We got some great Isle of St. Francis carpet pictures this time.
Yeah, we did include the surveillance photo in there too. So it was an actual surveillance photo, but it was it was meant to be that way. But yeah, it was that camera trap image of a centralian carpet catching a sparrowhawk of some sort, and then the other one was the same camera trap having a centralian carpet python hang out with a bunch of like tree frogs, kind of showing, they're not really afraid of the carpet and the carpet's not really going after them. So maybe frogs aren't really in the diet of centralian carpets, but birds definitely are, because we have that image, and that was very kindly provided by the researcher that was doing that work. So she was able to allow us to include that in the book. So even though they're kind of night vision, camera trap, poor quality photos, I thought they were illustrative of kind of a cool natural history event. So I'm glad she allowed us to do that. Yeah.
The hardest thing to get is getting pictures of wild Bredl's pythons is already hard enough. Getting the pictures of them eating something, getting wild pictures of wild carpets in the process of predating something, that is, it's gold. Like,
yeah,
I think that was one of my favorite pictures in there is a southwestern carpet from Wedge Island eating a shingleback skink.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
And talking to the lady who took the pictures, it took it like 24 hours. The skink is covered in armor, and so the skink wasn't giving up the ghost. And it was like it caught it in midday, and it was the following morning before it finally submitted and got swallowed. It was just nope, not having it, and just locked in this battle. Like, I felt bad for the skink, but it made for a really interesting photograph for the book.
Yeah, You got to be pretty desperate to try to take down a shingleback, but
how would you even digest that? It's like,
no, no, yeah, we find carcasses on the side of the road that have to be like 20 years old, and they're still identifiable as a shingleback skink.
yeah, because they still got like dermal scutes and stuff on them that are still stuck to the
Yeah.
bone.
Their dermal armor. It's pretty crazy. I think in regards to Tony's question, hello Tony, by the way. Good to see you. I got really geeked out on the cover photo and that group of pythons, the gammon ranges and Flinders ranges stuff. And I'm actually, planning a trip to South Australia for my 50th birthday to be out there, try to go find some of those in the wild. So yeah, should be, hopefully we'll get lucky and see one. But yeah, I just really I also think I have a more of an appreciation kind of for the wild type and less interest in morphs, I guess, focusing on the natural history and seeing all these variation, the variation in the different carpet python localities or groups or whatever, seeing the variability that's inherent in carpet pythons just gets me really excited for that. So that's how I'd answer that.
What about you, Nick?
Oh, forgot to unmute myself. I don't know. My position's situation's probably a little different. I've been obsessed with this group for 28 years, and it's never wavered so it's like I couldn't get more into it because I'm as far down that rabbit hole as you can possibly get. I got my first carpets in 1994, and I've still got the linear descendants of those animals from 1994. I still have 9 generations later, I still have the descendants of those original animals. So it deepens my appreciation and there's always something you don't know. There's always something else you learn. And when you write a book like this, it forces you to learn things you didn't know. It's not this book, and neither the last one or any of the books that Justin and I worked on, they're not books where we just know all this stuff and then we write down what we know. We have to learn. We learn a tremendous amount in the process of doing the research for the book. And anytime you're learning something new, that's what it's all about. So yeah.
Cool. Lisa just put up a question. Do all carpets battle except diamonds?
No.
Combat, I guess.
I guess combat.
Yeah.
Southwestern carpets don't, and inland carpets don't usually, but every once in a while, maybe. Generally speaking, your more southerly ranging forms of cold tolerant stuff, diamonds, inlands, and southwesterns don't. And you also see those are also the 3 where you have sexual size dimorphism in the other direction, with females being slightly larger on average than males, because obviously if males fight over who gets to breed the females, then there's selection pressure for bigger, stronger males as they'll win the fight. If there's no selection pressure for that, then bigger males are just kind of a waste of resources, really. So you tend to have smaller males and larger females.
Yeah, I mean, you also get some size disparity and to kind of keep the sexes from competing with each other. So like the southwestern carpets, there's some pretty extreme examples of that on islands, Garden Island and some of the other islands where the males are minuscule and they're feeding on mice, whereas the females are very large and eating wallabies. And I suspect Lisa knew that because I know she read Rick Shine's book. So yeah, the males of these, the small males don't bother wasting energy competing for each other, and actually several males will kind of line up and hang out near the female. Now that's not, I mean, that's like a general rule, and that's not always the case. And there have been some instances where, the ones that aren't typically known to combat will combat, or you see, some scars, but it's very, it's less commonly observed for sure. And there's just a greater trend towards the southwestern carpets and the diamonds just not combating, even though it may happen from time to time.
I like this one from Eric. This one might be for you, Nick. It concerns the Russians, tigers, or whatever those are. Would they be considered a northern or southern coastal?
I still haven't found that on the map. I'm gonna have to have Eric show me one of these days. I couldn't figure out how it was spelled or something.
It's going to be
Yakapuri Depot.
Yeah,
it's going to be like a lot of this stuff where you're never going to probably get good clarity. That bloodline there's no locality associated with it, so it's in the sort of generic, non-locality basket. Phenotypically, though they make red babies and whatnot, that's not a specifically exclusive to a southern population, that trait. Phenotypically, to me, they always looked a bit more northern, and I would suspect if they were from a particular place, they're probably in that Cheney grouping. But again, without any concrete or even suspicion of where these things came from, it'd be pretty difficult to assign them. And I guess you could look at them at the molecular level, but that would be very expensive to do to answer that question.
Gotcha.
Cool. I guess, we're about 10 minutes away. Nick, I know you're on a hard out. Where can
they get the book?
Where did they get the book? I know I saw people on the internet. They did oh, there you go.
there's cases back there. I just picked some
Justin's. Yeah.
People were freaking out because it's a pre-order and they wanted it ordered. Like, that's why it's called a pre-order.
You order it before you get it.
Well, the people who pre-order will definitely be getting theirs first. So, and we'll be getting to the others later. But yeah, there will be. We had a print run, and I was there when the books arrived. So I actually just got back. Like, we got on the podcast after I haven't even loaded all the books from the car, but so I got there when the truck arrived and saw the big stack of boxes of books. So there should be some available. If you want signed copies, Nick and I can provide those signed by one or the other of us, whoever you order from. And then we're trying not to ship books back and forth between us, so unless you're really desperate for a copy signed by both of us, we might be able to do that, but it's going to cost a bit extra for the trouble and effort to ship them back and forth.
You don't want to charge people because it looks like you're charging for a signature, but most people don't realize, especially if they're overseas, that like Justin and I live over 1,000 miles away from each other. It's not, and these books are heavy, so it's got to, books got to get shipped from one and then to the other. You run up additional shipping costs on a heavy book to do that.
And with all the books we've published, it seems like right as we get them, the U.S. Postal Service ups its prices by like $1 or $2. I don't know how this occurs, but it seems like if we write a book, they're going to up their prices like after we charge people for shipping, so it's like we're going to be losing money on shipping in some instances. But and we still need to figure out what or I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot of logistics to this. And now, Nick and I both have quite a few pre-orders and it's going to take time to get through that. So I guess we're just kind of going by, whoever ordered first, they're going to get their book first. So if they pay first, they're getting their book first.
Please be patient. If there was 30 or 40 pre-orders, get them all out on the first day. When there's 300 pre-orders, and 100 of them are overseas, so each one of those requires a customs declaration.
Yeah.
You can't fill out a customs declaration and bubble wrap and pack this thing for an international voyage and do that many in a day. And if you showed up at the post office with that many at once, they'd probably murder you.
Oh yeah.
Based on the size, once they're wrapped and packaged for shipping, if I had all of them done at one time, it would fill the entire bed of my truck twice. That's how many books it would be. So it's like, my goal is like, I want to get them all out this next week. They should be here hopefully Friday. Starting on Monday, I want to get out like 60, 70 a day, just in the order they came in and get them all sent on their way. But it's way past what even 2 people could do in a day, because of enough. Which I know, I'm sure I can speak for Justin too. We're stoked that people are that interested, and it's like,
thank you.
So much validated. Yeah, I'm happy there's this much interest, but it's a bit
It's
overwhelming.
going to be a lot of work. Yeah. Especially where I have a full-time job. Like I'm going to have to find spare time to package books. And
Put them viruses on the back burner
You
for
have,
a few
don't
weeks.
you have like college students, you know,
Yeah,
doing some
right.
credit? Wrap a book. Yeah.
I
If
can
only it
relate
were
to
that
how
easy. That would
I
be
can
great.
relate to how the post office looks at you when you know, I'm just bringing calendars and people they're like, why is all these calendars? It's just like, oh my
Expecting
God,
a truck full of books up.
thick-ass
They're like,
book.
what the hell? Yeah.
I'm planning on hitting post offices on the way home. So I'll just drive to separate post offices and drop, 10, 20 of them off at once. And
I was thinking of doing that too, like just take every day's batch to a
Spread 'em
different
out.
post office so they don't get mad at me.
Yeah.
Post
Oh
office.
man, so anyway, I was coming back from Mexico and I messaged Bob and I said, hey, I'm in the area, or the book's here, and he said, I think they're coming at 2:00, and I'm like, oh great, that's gonna mean I'm gonna have to spend another night, and get back half a day later or whatever. So I'm like, well, it's better than having them ship them all to me. So we're loading them into the truck, and I'm watching it gets lower and lower, and putting more strain on the tires. I'm like, wait, how many books have we loaded? I'm like, okay, I don't need that many. Let's take out a few cases.
Why are all these sparks coming behind me? It's weird.
You definitely
I
made
was
the right
worried
move.
it was going to be a little rough ride home, but we made it back, and I'm back home. So
you definitely came out ahead picking them up yourself. I got the invoice from Bob. The shipping, it was $750.
Holy man!
Just to ship the boxes from Bob, it was 34 cases of books, and to send them from him to me was $750.
Because I got 33 cases, so I got one less than you. So I mean, I had to pay to drive down there, but not that much. So
still not $750.
I came out ahead.
I'm just a little too far to drive all the way to Arizona. That might be a bit much for me.
Yeah. And I mean, like I said, we were down there anyway, and I got to go herping. So, except I found this, it was a little juvenile hognose that had just been hit by a car. And we done a pass and missed it. I'm really sad about that. I keep finding these recently hit hognose. I need to see a live one, but what do you do? We did see a beautiful coach whip. It was like liquid lightning, though. We didn't get anywhere near it, but it just kind of zipped across the road. But it was one of those really red, pink ones. Really nice. So
you need you need some Bobby Pebbles to grab those.
Yeah,
exactly. Have Rob sacrifice his body for it.
That's I remember that dive, man. That was impressive.
You all had to applaud for that one, and then ask if his ribs were broken.
Yeah, that's right.
So remember how this is going to be my advice, right? Remember how when the complete carpet python, nobody could find it, and it was like $400 on Amazon. Just buy 2 books.
Yes,
one from Nick, one from Justin.
Yeah,
one's signed from Nick, one signed from Justin, and you'll have them on your shelf. You'll be good to go. That's it. That's how you have to do it.
And if you have to sell one, down the road, when it's worth more money,
the coins,
you can keep your kidney.
It's like a collectible. Kidney, and, keep it in its wrapping, and it will go up in value, right?
Yeah, exactly. But amazing job, guys. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I mean, this is I'm reading this on my trip.
People would actually have a chance to read it.
Yeah.
But I'm excited for you, man. Find a lot of stuff. Get some good pictures.
Hopefully I find some McDowell.
Yeah. Well, my buddy Mick Austin, he just sent me a bunch of pictures. He's got like six carpets that he found on his property in the last week. One of them was eating something. They're great pictures, and they're just really diverse. And I mean, these are all on his property. So they're moving right now. You're going over at a good time. So yeah, if you don't find one, then I'm just gonna have to just declare you as a terrible herper.
He's not bringing me.
No pressure.
He's not bringing me, so he's already at a disadvantage. So.
That's right. That's right.
I got
also
Owen,
susceptible to large birds.
Guaranteed.
Yeah.
I got Mr. McPeak, the OP.
Yeah. Okay.
There you go. You got Bobby Pebbles.
Decent trade up. Yeah.
Yeah. You guys will be in good shape.
Yeah. The place
if you need, you just have Viper go out there and
get us one.
Yeah. Here it is.
Knock down a tree.
Yeah, it'll be all right. Yeah. I mean, the place we're going to has carpet sited right on the property, so hopefully we'll be good.
Yeah.
But
that was Nick. Nick and I had that luck up in Darwin on the property of our Airbnb.
On it.
Yeah. We were walking around at night. We're like, oh, there's one.
like, wow, we're off to a great start.
It's always great when you find it right there.
Yeah, it's so in 2032 when we're looking at the more complete carpet python book.
Comes like the Fast and Furious naming convention at that point.
More carpets, more complete.
All right. Any final thoughts? Any, put out whatever you want, and yeah.
No, we're excited. Hopefully you guys enjoy it too. We had a lot of fun writing it and a lot of pain and anguish writing it. So hopefully it's worth reading.
You do always have a little bit of anxiety about like, well, I hope people like this. Like, it's like when you're that immersed in something for 4 years, like you kind of get you're so close to it that you understand it perfectly, but you kind of wonder, is anybody else going to understand this? Because I know, you kind of like, you don't have that distance. That's why we sent you some stuff in advance. It's like, can you understand this?
Yeah, if I can understand it, you're all right.
Well, I feel like it doesn't have to be easy to understand. You just have to be able to, like, if you read it twice, well, you understand what we're saying. Like, that's, I always still wonder, like, and even like, as we're explaining a lot of this stuff, looking at some of the comments and like, oh, this is going to confuse some people.
It's going to take a while. People will have to reread it. They'll get it. It'll be fine.
But if you don't challenge the reader at all, what was the point? If you don't bring anything new to the table, if the readers never challenge at all, then they probably didn't learn anything. And if they didn't learn anything, what was the point of the book in the first place? It's like you should challenge people to learn something and go a little further, than they've gone before. So that's kind of the point. I guess it's trying to like present this sometimes complicated stuff in a manner that people can get their brains around. I mean, talking endlessly about Pleistocene sea levels and its, correlation to habitat. It's like, this is pretty kind of not stuff that people generally think about.
Nick, I can tell you
basins and how it correlates to dispersal mechanisms for species, and this stuff is not, right at the forefront of most people in the hobby's mind.
Whenever I hear the word Pleistocene, I immediately think of you. Immediately. You're the first person that comes to my head.
I kind of have an obsession with Pleistocene megafauna too. So
yes,
I have a collection of I have a collection of mammoth fossils, and
yes,
I've got a cave bear jaw. It's like a side of a jaw from a juvenile cave bear. Like, yeah, right.
Yeah, I need this for reasons. Like,
I got a couple of like steppe bison. I got the atlas bone from a steppe bison. Like all this like extinct Pleistocene fauna. Nice. That period of time I find really interesting.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I will say too that I really enjoyed writing the book with Nick. He's a good, a great co-author, pulls his own weight, has a lot of great insights and things like that. So it's been a pleasure writing with Nick, and I'm excited to write more books with him. So
yeah, this along that same lines, I would say that, I mean, Justin knows people, and I know people, and people tend to I wouldn't want anybody to walk away from looking at this book thinking that it was anything less than a complete team effort. It was not. Nobody's pulled more weight than the other person. Like, there is equal contributions, and it's, Justin graciously let me keep my name first on the title of the book because he knows that carpet pythons are like my thing. My life's work is carpet pythons. So he knew it was kind of important to me. But no one should look at that my name is first and assume that I did any more than Justin did. That's not the case at all. It is very much a partnership. And again, like it's hard to find somebody to write that higher level type of stuff with that does pull their weight and knows how to, and they have a good rapport with. And you have a singular vision, and that's harder to find than it might seem. So I appreciate being able to do these with Justin because we have our views are very much aligned in what we want to do and how we want to present it. And so it does make it a much smoother process.
Yeah, for sure.
You're like the McCartney and Lennon of the reptile book world.
Of the carpet python publishing world. It's like a very narrow
It keeps getting narrower as he's talking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The next edition will have to be 2 volumes.
I will say too, even though we're kind of not looking necessarily forward to the initial effort that it's going to take to get all these shipped out, we do make a little bit more if you order directly from us rather than from Eco. So if you're okay to wait a little bit, we'd appreciate the business that way too. It helps us kind of recoup some of the costs associated. I mean, if you look at the time put into this and the money that we make from it, it's pennies. It's nothing.
It's like $1 an hour.
if that,
it might not even be that. It might be less than $1 an hour.
This is 4 years of effort, and fairly intense effort. A lot of conversations, a lot of back and forth. Like, oh, what do we do with this? What do we want to settle on here? What are we gonna say? And we talked on the phone quite a bit. I almost missed the daily conversations. Like, man, I haven't talked to Nick for a couple of weeks. He's probably sick of talking to me. So I'm not going to call him for a while. But,
you get to a point where you're close to the finish line and you just want to be done so badly. You just want to be done and put it in one of the happiest days of my life is being able to, it's done. It's off. The blue line's approved. We're
it's
done.
Going to the publisher.
Anything.
We can't change it now.
Such a relief.
Yeah.
And now we're, right back at it again.
Yep. Next one.
Yeah.
Yeah, but nobody's like chomping. Nobody knows about the next one, so there's nobody like.
You get to have that big reveal later on.
Nobody
We're all like,
about when it's going to be done because most people don't know that it exists.
Yeah, put that off for a
too
while.
Much. Yeah.
No, it's just so you can kind of go at a more leisurely pace, and you don't have the stress of, because we wanted to have the carpet book out about a year before we did. It took about a year longer. The final round of rewrites, it just added like another year to it. Because we have lives outside of writing books and whatnot, and families and kids that like to be paid attention to sometimes, and
maybe,
and herp trips to go on.
Yeah, right. Like soon, 6 weeks. I'm out of here too. So.
Nice.
I haven't gone anywhere since my Cape York trip. It's been almost 6 years.
Oh yeah!
Holy shit!
I'm gonna wander around my backyard depressed.
It's supposed to be like a 2-year break. It would have been 2 years after that. Then I had the whole go dive with whale sharks and look for roughies trip, all bought and paid for. And then Australia decided, you know what? Don't come. They locked the door in the whole country for 2.5 years or whatever, and then so it was and here we are. So now we're finally able to.
That's why Eric hasn't seen a southwestern carpet yet.
Yeah, that is
I was
true.
3 days away.
Yeah.
3 days away.
That sucks. Yeah, it's brutal. So hopefully.
I'll be back there in 25 hours?
Yeah.
25 hours.
25 whole hours. Yeah.
Nice.
25 hours. So.
Don't look forward to the plane ride, but
no,
it's worth it.
He's fine.
I generally put it to good use. Like I've got a little tiny laptop.
Luckily,
tiny little laptop, and I tend to get a lot of writing done when I'm stuck on a plane for 10 hours or 12 hours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So on this upcoming trip, I plan on getting some progress made because it's like I got no distractions and nothing else to do but focus on, 18 hours of travel time there and back in total. So I should be able to get something done.
Yeah, I'm really jealous of this trip, Nick. Take lots of good pictures, man. That's a cool trip.
I don't know if I told you where we're going.
Oh, I thought you did.
We were supposed to go to Australia, then that got changed. Then we're going to go to Ecuador and the Galapagos, and then that got changed.
So you're not going to the Galapagos. Okay.
Turns out that Ecuador is not really that easy to get around in, and in the time we had, while it's totally doable to do what we wanted to do, we just did not have enough time to properly plan the logistics of that, and we would end up with a trip that was just disappointing because
you want to do that one right. You don't want to freewheel that.
It was on one side or the other of the Andes, not in a low valley in the middle of it. So no matter where you go to the coastal rainforest to look for annulatas or the interior to look for emeralds, you have to fly over the Andes Mountains in either direction.
What the hell?
And there's no real good road network. It's not a lot of infrastructure, so I'm definitely doing that trip, but maybe that's next year. So we switched it up and we're going to Southeast Asia.
Oh, cool.
Cool.
Nice.
So
Nice.
I'm going to go
Yeah,
to Vietnam, Thailand, maybe Malaysia.
Cool.
So I'm going to find a python
territory.
in the wild that's not an Australian python.
Yeah.
Go find a rejig or something.
Yeah.
I'm headed to Costa Rica, so I'll be looking for.
When are you going to Costa Rica?
In a couple weeks, 2 weeks.
We're all go.
Yeah.
I'll be here.
Sorry,
I'm
Owen.
staying here.
Well, you're married, as you said.
Yeah.
I'm gonna stay here in Pennsylvania, and I will cry. So that's fine.
I say this all the time, and I say it sound like a broken record, but people have got to get out and travel and do and see this stuff.
100%.
If there's anything I could impart on people, it's like get off of your butt and go. Just go. Make it happen.
Yeah.
Go to Australia or the Amazon or wherever it is, and see these places and experience that firsthand. And it's an amazing experience, and it's a huge world, and most of it's not here. There's all these amazing places, but you gotta put in some effort to get there. And once you do that, it just changes your whole perspective on everything, on your own life, your own country, the world, life itself, everything. It's very it's life affirming and life changing, and to not do that, I just can't imagine not doing that.
I wish I would have did it sooner.
Chapter of the book, actually, like get out and see this stuff.
Yep.
Even if you just get out in your backyard too. I mean, there's plenty.
You can
of
go
good
herping
stuff.
in all the other places. I had fun herping in the U.S. when we couldn't leave it.
Yeah.
So that was
exactly.
I've
That
lived in
made
the
me
same
have
house
a greater appreciation.
I've lived in the same house for 20 years, and I just found out this summer, accidentally with Ryan Young, that there's a spot 4 minutes drive from my house that's crawling with rattlesnakes, rubber boas, like gopher snakes, toads. There's just all this stuff, and it's literally I could ride my bike there. It's that close. Like I spent all summer, like every night it was warm. I'm like I'm out. I'm like finding rattlesnakes like crazy. It's like how did I not know this was literally not my neighborhood, but pretty close to my neighborhood.
Nice.
No idea. Just went out there on a whim with Ryan after a trip to Seattle. It was like, no, it's about the right time to go herping. We should go check it out. Like, found like 8 rattlesnakes in one night. It was just the craziest thing.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I live in a pretty bad place to go herping. There's not a lot around where I'm at. And even if you get out there, you'll find stuff.
Yeah.
100%. 100%. I couldn't agree more. I wish I would have did it sooner, but you can't change the past. You just do what you do now. So that's it.
Yeah. Well,
okay.
Thanks for coming on, guys.
Yeah.
And talking about the book.
Appreciate it.
We'll pencil you in 11 years from now for the next copy or for whatever else is going on.
Somebody else can write the next one.
Yeah. By then Eric will be on Eric's going to be in an iron lung, and we'll have to hold the mic for him. And it'll be, I'll have some gray in here. Yeah.
Just a little.
Yeah.
But, all right. Well, I guess we will. So your websites, right? Inlandreptile.com is where you'll find the book from you and Australian Addiction Reptile or Reptiles. I always forget.
AustralianAddiction.com is
got it.
My website.
Yeah. Gotcha. Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Congratulations for your great job on the book. And I know carpet python enthusiasts will love it. I promise. So.
We won't bug you for at least a month about what the next book is going to be. So you have 30 days from now.
Yeah.
So there you go.
I tend to get most of my writing done once I start to stop feeding snakes and go into cycling mode for the breeding season, because when you stop feeding them so much, they stop crapping all the time.
Right. You're not cleaning all the time. Yeah.
The water barely even evaporates. It's like nothing. It's kind of not doing anything. So your maintenance, and by that point, all the babies are usually eating. I'm not doing that, and a lot of them are gone. And so you guys have a little bit of a lull, and I try to get stuff accomplished in that kind of like a January, February, March before things start ramping up again.
So. Okay.
Cool.
I'm sure we'll be talking soon. And thanks again, guys.
All right. Always a pleasure.
Yep.
Yes.
Thanks,
guys. All right.
So I guess, Eric, now we must run through the closing thingies, and then we can end the show, or what do you want to do? Just leave, say goodbye, everybody.
No, we can put the closing thingies out.
We have to
because I
tell
didn't
the
put
people
the closing thingies out when it was me and Nipper.
Right. Which thank you for the shout out. I did play that for Melissa, the beginning parts of that. I didn't listen to the whole episode yet. But yeah,
absolutely.
I'm like, look, Nipper and Eric shouted us out. So on my own show.
How about that? Yes. Yeah. So let's see. So I'll just give a real quick NPR network update of what's going to go on, because I won't be here for about 2 weeks.
He's gone, and
right?
he holds all the passwords. 2 weeks.
Right.
2 weeks.
Basically 2 weeks. Right.
I mean, should probably Lucas and I can probably do a carpets and coffee in the meantime, just to,
Yeah, you could do that.
We could do that.
Yeah, sure.
Lucas, you can trust Lucas and I to at least do 1 or 2 shows.
Yeah, I can.
While you're gone.
You'll have to do live shows. Yeah, for sure.
We can do live shows. That's fine.
There's a Reptile Fight Club coming out. There is an Australian herpetoculture podcast coming out. Obviously, if you're listening to this via podcast, you know that this came out.
Yes.
And then the following week, probably nothing, except unless Owen and Lucas do some live stuff.
Yeah, I'll try to do a live show, one or 2 shows. They won't have any topics. It'll just be Lucas and I shooting the shit, but it'll be something to bridge the gap until you guys get back. Also, I'll be working on the calendar stuff. When you get back, we'll do your show on your trip, and then we'll probably just roll right into the calendar after that.
We also have Warren Booth coming on, because Warren Booth was he was involved in writing some of the chapters in the Complete Carpet. So we're chatting with him
to
about
complete
that.
the book tour.
Yeah, have to for sure.
Yep.
We have what else do we have? I have a couple other people lined up. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but yes, we have the calendar. We didn't really do an anniversary show, but this is sort of 11 years. Woohoo!
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We're gonna have plenty of talk about for the next.
Well, and it's like, and here's the thing: we're steaming. People don't realize it, that like it's very quickly, rapid succession. Like we have a couple of shows, and all of a sudden we're gonna be right into the point of holiday show, and
show. Yes.
That's it. So we're getting there.
Yeah. We're like, wait, what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks away from the holiday show.
Jesus Christ.
I have a lot of grievances this year, people.
I mean, there's a whole goddamn list right now. Don't you worry.
So yeah, we got a breeding season episode that we do every year. That's going to come up.
Talk about that, which I don't even know what's going on with my
we'll talk about that when I get back.
Just got torpedoed. Like it just
And what's the other? There's something else. The Trey from Cold Blooded Caffeine Company has officially worked up the logo. He's shipping it off to get the bags done, and then the coffee will be coming soon.
The NPR blend.
Yes, it's pretty cool. So we got that going on. So we'll be talking about that soon, and hopefully, I find some carpet pythons to come back and talk about.
If you don't, you failed me as a
some
co-host.
Monitors.
Okay.
Remember,
if you're fast enough, monitors can be tricky and rather sharp. So make sure you grab them correctly. Otherwise, it will hurt you.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, and I'll have to send you when we get off of here. I will have to send you the pictures. Rob just did a real.
Oh, did he do his pre-trip?
Well, yeah. But he did a real quick, to Justin's point, what he was saying earlier, that he did a recap of what people have put on iNaturalist,
right?
Like the past
in
couple
the areas
weeks.
that you're going to. Yeah.
Holy shit, dude!
Oh, God damn it!
Holy shit!
Yeah, all right. You have to. The problem is that so Melissa and I are going on our honeymoon next year, 2023. You cannot let him, if he starts talking about the Kimberley, you need to smack him and say that we're going to Southern Australia in 2023. 2024 is for the Kimberley, okay?
Yes.
Thank you.
Very good.
Don't do this to me.
Yes. I won't do it to you. I promise.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
as we talk. I'm going to forward. There it is. It's going to NPR Network.
And there will be a Carpet Fest announcement at the holiday show.
Yeah, we did talk about that at your wedding a little bit.
We did.
Yeah, we did.
It was my father who yelled at us.
He did. He did. Yeah, he was very upset at the lack of Carpet Fest going on. Dude, where do you see these coastal carpets, man?
Oh, Jesus.
You're gonna love it.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. I'm not. Holy shit, they're gorgeous.
But the last one I'm going to send you is, I think, the icing on the cake. It's just a beautiful.
And you guys are going to, is this Brisbane, or where are you guys going again? Was it Cape
flying into Brisbane?
Okay.
We're going to stop off at a couple spots on our way up as soon as we land.
Yeah.
So we're going to check out the Australia Zoo. Obviously, we're on the way, so we got to do that. And then we're going to the place, which is like I think it's like a 6 or 7 hour drive. And then, we're going to be at this.
That's
freaking
gorgeous.
Amazing. You see them?
Yes.
Yeah.
Look at all the dots. Like I hit one of the pictures and it shows all the dots. There's a fuck ton of these things.
Yes. Oh God, I hope I see a whole bunch of them.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Just for that, I'm gonna go like wander around my backyard and hope until I find something. Like, oh my God, I need to do a herping thing. I need to do something.
Yeah. So NPR, that's sort of what's going on with the network for the couple of weeks. That's where it's at. So if you're wondering where we're at, I know it's been kind of crazy as of late, but now Owen's wedding is past us. After this trip is past us, then we'll be back
to business as usual.
Right. So for us, MorelliPythonRadio.com is where you can find us. All the information is there. Follow us on all the socials, Facebook, Instagram, and please subscribe to the YouTube channel.
Yep.
We have we're going to be working on the calendars. So once they're all done and ready to go, we will be starting orders for that. And if you want to get in touch with us, info@MorelliPythonRadio.com.
Yep.
And we got
Teespring
store still up. And then also we have the Patreon, which I guess when I come back,
we'll do a thing.
We'll do a
Patreon stream for that.
We'll do we'll share pictures, or I'll see what videos I have or something of the trip and stuff.
Yeah, we'll do something because Eric is going to have a GoPro strapped to his head, so we'll have Eric vision the entire trip, which will be a lot of chest down from a lot of people. Yeah, it's not the best, but it's what we got. So
I had to raise my chair extra high, you know what I mean, so that I'm even with you, because it's been for a long time that I'm usually like way down low. But
they had the one picture of us at my wedding where I'm like, I got my hand over your shoulder and like you come right up here, and I'm like, I'm very glad that now I'll have photograph and fancy evidence of how tall you are. So yeah,
I think that was forced perspective or something, because I'm like, holy shit, am I really? I'm like, what the fuck?
It was a ramp.
Everybody is right.
It was a ramp, and you happened to be just a little bit further down, and it was just perfect. So I'm like, yep, take the picture. Let's go,
motherfucker. I'm only 2'2". Oh, it's good stuff.
Oh my God, he's been right this whole time.
Good stuff. All right, right on. I will see you in 10 days.
Have a good trip, man. Have fun and send pictures.
Right on.
All right. Bye, everybody.
See you.